Welcome to the Caravan Show, where we discuss all things caravans. That's right, everything you need to know about caravans, from weights, towing, maintenance, appliances, renovations, buying a caravan, repairs, destinations and reviews. We'll also chat with some Aussie legends, manufacturers, suppliers and of course people who love caravans. Take it away.
Good morning, listeners, and thank you for taking the time to listen to another podcast. This morning, I'm very excited to tell you that we've got Stuart Lamont. Now, Stuart is the CEO of the CIAA. That is the Caravan Industry Association of Australia, not the CIA like you hear in America. I mean, it's totally different to that, of course. But welcome to our podcast this morning, Stuart.
G'day, Roy. How are you going?
Good, thank you. Tell me, how long have you been the CEO for?
Look, I joined the organisation about 12 years ago, and obviously we're seeing a significant amount of change, both within the industry and also our organisation. I guess I've been the CEO for 7 or 8 years now.
As CEO, who or what exactly are you responsible for?
Yeah, look, the Caravan Industry Association of Australia has got a very wide gamut of stakeholders. Not only do we have industry, which covers the entire array of industry businesses, from suppliers to manufacturers to retailers, repairers, but also caravan parks, both short and long term. And we've got about 800,000 consumers that we regularly interact with. So very wide gambit. On top of that, we undertake regularly with government in relation to issues, whether they be regulatory or legislative, to try and obviously improve the outcomes for consumers, but also advocate strongly on behalf of industry businesses.
With such a wide range of responsibilities, you've been doing it for 8 years, so I guess that makes you qualified anyway, but what other qualifications did you bring to the table that would enable you to handle such a huge task?
I've had varied business degrees or experience throughout my lifetime. I certainly hold a Bachelor of Business out of the University of Canterbury, and undertaken a number of postgrad in relation to finance and investment. But beyond that, it's a school of hard knocks, and I do sit as the chair of a number of tourism boards. I sit as the current chair of the World RV Committee, and have done so for the last 5 or 6 years, and that gives me a very wide, gambit of incoming knowledge to highlight in terms of not only what's happening in Australia from a tourism perspective, highly experienced from government lobbying perspective, but also in terms of what's happening around the world, so that we can hopefully input in terms of various standards that may be imposed upon Australia, but also understanding in terms of what's working and what's not working around the world.
Wow, okay. That's a very impressive CV. Stuart, tell me, how do you see the state of the industry at this moment in time? I mean, we've obviously been heavily impacted by COVID-19, but putting COVID-19 aside, because we know that is in fact going to diminish shortly, at least we hope so, as things open up. But coming out the other end of that, we had a reasonably strong industry going into it. How do you see the strength of the industry coming out of it?
Look, I think the great thing about caravan camping is that it's part of the Australian psyche. What you do is, historically, you go to school, you get a trade, you get married, you buy a house, you work for 40 years, and then you hook up the caravan and trip around the country. So, in good times and in bad, caravanning has a soft spot amongst Australians. So, we certainly have the opportunity of one knowledge and working with a fantastic platform of industry product. If we look at last year, and this is pre-COVID, for the first time, caravan holiday parks were the number one commercial accommodation out in regional Australia, and 90% of all our activity is out in the regions. But we're also Australia's favourite pastime when it comes to tourism accommodation, certainly surpassing hotels and motels for the first time. So there's been a massive upswing of people who want to try our product, whether it be through purchasing a van, hooking up the camper, driving the motorhome, or going and staying in roofed accommodation, within the many fantastic caravan parks that are spread around the country. And certainly the amount of money that I know has been spent into those. I mean, if I compare when I first came into the industry, what these caravan parks looked like and what they are now, very much poles apart.
Yeah, the facilities have improved dramatically, haven't they? And
That's right.
we've spent a lot of time in recent days talking to the mayors throughout region Australia, and certainly those that may not have been as keen on caravanners in their towns and cities previously are definitely seeing a different tune, or singing a different tune, should I say, today. But the majority
Sorry, Roy. I think with COVID-19, what it has highlighted to many of these mayors out in regional Queensland, particularly, who would be the beneficiary now of this northern drift, the absence of those grey nomads and longer-term travellers in their caravans, has been quite noticeable, noticeably absent from these communities, and all of these communities are small and rely very heavily in terms of every available dollar that comes into these communities. And the absence, like the rest of the economy, is hurting, but very noticeable out in these small country towns.
Yeah, so what we're hearing is that they recognise this, they see how important the caravanners are to their local communities, and they're saying, look, we want you to come and visit. And the question we've been posing is, well, if you're asking them to come and visit, what are you offering? Are you actually putting out the welcome mat? Are there things to see and do? And I've been blown away, absolutely blown away, that there's just so much to see and find out about things that are on our own doorstep that most average Australian wouldn't even have a clue about. And of course, assuming that we start to spend more time travelling domestically, as international travel is going to become, or certainly is at the moment, extremely difficult and less desirable. They really are having to cater for it. So how do you see this affecting our industry in terms of production?
Look, I think there's a massive upswing in potential. You quite rightly indicated that individuals that may have considered an international trip or a cruise holiday, for that matter, are now going, well, what am I going to do now? There are many superannuants, people approaching retiree that have had an element of mortality. With COVID thrust upon them, and so what they're going is, I've always dreamed about going and hooking up the caravan or going buying the motorhome, and there's no better time now to actually go and do that. So, despite the fact that we have seen restrictions out in the marketplace, we're getting really strong feedback from our dealers and they're flowing through to our manufacturers that demand for industry product is incredibly high. As not only those individuals going, well, let's go out there and have a domestic road trip, but also those individuals that may be substituting out of those other alternatives, such as international and particularly cruise.
So if we talk in terms of raw data or raw numbers, how many caravans would you think there are out there in Australia travelling the country today?
Look, we believe there's over 800,000 caravans and motorhomes that are registered today. At any one time, we suspect that there's well over 100,000 of those that are mobile and out there tripping around the country. And I guess what that does do is it contributes, as we mentioned before, significant amount of money into regional community. 90% of all of our activity is out in the regions. The Caravanning campus spend $8.6 billion. Predominantly out to these small country towns and regional communities. And the overall economy, if we take into consideration the manufacturing and retail and the flow-on effect of that tourism dollar, we're talking about a $22 billion industry. So, caravan and camping is not just an activity, it's an industry in its own right. And I think people underestimate that.
Yes, it's an extremely important industry. I mean, it also obviously produces a lot of jobs as well. We've got
Absolutely.
People manufacturing, people selling, people servicing, people supplying, catering to, and then the travellers themselves within those caravans going into the regional centres, as we've already mentioned, producing jobs and incomes into those areas. I mean, it has to be a massive producer of jobs in this country, which is something we desperately need as well.
Absolutely. Over 50,000 people are directly employed in our industry, and as you say, there are many people that are indirectly benefited as a result of activity within the caravan and camping industry.
Now, Stuart, we haven't always enjoyed a particularly good reputation, that is as manufacturers of caravans, with a lot of people criticising the manufacturing industry. I personally, as a manufacturer myself, feel that there are some justifications, but also that we've we've had to face a lot of changes. I mean, I remember 20 years ago when a caravan was very basic, and yet today, they want air conditioning on every caravan. They want hot water services and showers and toilets and heaters and satellite dishes put on the roof and electric this and electric that. I mean, they become so complex that our caravan manufacturers have had to become something entirely different to what we originally were. We're not just building caravans anymore. We seem to be needed to be experts on just about every subject matter there is.
Absolutely.
But the industry has recognised this and have made moves towards trying to improve the industry as such. So, and a lot of those initiatives actually have come out of your association, as I understand it.
Yeah, look, we recognised very early on that our caravan or camper van motorhome is the second or third largest purchase you'll ever make in a lifetime. So, we were concerned that there was some poor quality product streaming into the industry, primarily from overseas, but some local manufacturers were not doing themselves a favour either. And while the caravan industry, which might be quite surprising to your listeners, is one of the most heavily regulated industries that I'm aware of when I go out to communicate with all my association colleagues, the enforcement by our regulators has let us down as an industry. So as a result, we're very proud to have introduced a very tough regime which goes and inspects many products. While the federal government inspected 6 caravan products last year, as an industry association, we went and inspected over 1,100. And what that does is it highlights in terms of industry trends. It allows us to educate people in terms of, better behaviour. And what we're seeing is a marked decrease of issues that we identify out in the marketplace. Some 40% decrease over the last couple of years. So that's not only good for, industry businesses that need to remain competitive, and there's a very tough market out there at the moment, but also great news for consumers who will get, as you say, very good product. These are no longer white boxes on wheels. They're highly customised to the modern day consumers. So that reflects in terms of the legislative and regulatory environment we have to operate in. And we need to make sure as an association that our industry businesses are aware of what their obligations are. And
of course, your role takes in the RV map area now. I was a member of the previous board, the RVMAA, and that association amalgamated, and you're now in control of what's now be called RVMAP. Now, over the years, they've received a lot of flack from people saying, they're toothless tigers and da-da-da-da. But the reality is that if consumers are buying from those members, then at least they've got the knowledge of knowing that they are being regulated, that people are checking, that there are things being done to ensure, as best we possibly can, that everyone's doing the right thing. And it is a badge that actually stands for a lot more than some people would have you believe. And of course, those that usually knock it are those that aren't members, that aren't being subject to audits, and aren't having people come around and check their caravans and saying, hey, listen, guys, this isn't right, So
absolutely, and consumer comments are disappointing from a small vocal minority. We've gone out and regularly surveyed individuals in terms of whether a badge is important. And over 60% of people have indicated that it forms some part of their purchase decision to know that the manufacturer is prepared to sign a contract, so that they're committed to manufacturing products in accordance with the Australian design rules and various federal regulations. And that those businesses also allow us as an independent third party, as an association, to go in and inspect against those commitments. So we educate on the back end of that. And if I was going to part with a sizable amount of money in knowing what I know, there's no way that I would buy a product that didn't carry a badge. And the statistics showcasing there are 4 times less issues with products that carry the badge as opposed to that aren't. You're just dicing not only with your life but that of your families. And some of the product that I see that has not subjected themselves to industry inspection and does not make a commitment, those products shouldn't be on the road.
Yeah, look, I agree. In fact, someone put it to me very well the other day. you wouldn't go out and buy an unknown brand motor car, would you? You wouldn't go and spend $80,000 on a car that wasn't a known brand, something that doesn't actually have a badge on it that says that it is something. And yet we have consumers do this fairly regularly, and I'm not totally sure I understand why they go down that track. And, of course, when they do have a problem, it's not a problem with that particular brand. It becomes an industry issue as far as they're concerned.
Absolutely. And we unfortunately hear too often of consumers that have fallen foul and haven't gone through the necessary pre-checks and haven't made their own investigations, and certainly have purchased a product in good faith outside of the program and come unstuck. And we try our best to obviously help them out, but we believe that many of those examples could have been eliminated if they had come to us in advance, made some necessary inspections, and obviously bought a product that is RVMF accredited.
There's another point there too that's often overlooked, Stuart, and that is that the associations themselves have been heavily responsible in assisting with the reduction of caravan thefts by pushing the laws and regulations and making sure that it's more and more difficult for people to get away with stealing and rebadging caravans and putting them back into the market. It's being done by the industry. It's not being done by the police.
Yeah, look, the industry has a very positive relationship with the police, and as you mentioned before, when a consumer has a bad experience, unfortunately, it's not necessarily with the brand or the particular product that they have, but they view it's the industry that's at fault. And I can tell from experience the amount of positive conversations that we have with government and with government agencies, and I know that's not only ourselves but our state caravanning association colleagues. They have a great relationship with police, and as far as we're concerned, one caravan accident too many, and one caravan theft is one caravan theft too many. So anything we can do to assist that process, and again give consumers a great experience, we absolutely are advocating for.
Yeah, and again, this is another part of what's occurring today through social media. Of course, it's very easy to people get onto these social medias and start yelling, or in effect, the one I have the strongest problems with are the experts, the guys that want to get on the internet and tell people how the law works, or how their caravan works, or how components work, or what caused this problem, what caused that problem. And these people are highly unqualified people. They just people that maybe have had an individual experience that are touting it. The truth of the matter, or the reality of life is, however, that those that have a problem are a very small minority of those that are absolutely out there enjoying and loving every minute of it. And those people that aren't caravanning, that are in fact using other forms of travel. I've got lots of horror stories to talk about boats and about their ship experience at the moment. Let's face it, there's lots of people that's going to be screaming about that one in the future. But airports and all those,
even cars. When you look at the choice report in relation to new cars, you would think, given that they are relatively automated in their production, and they're from large multinational companies, some 50% of individuals still have a major problem with the new car, and yet there's this expectation that a caravan, which is made up of 1,200 moving parts, should be full of fault. Now we need to minimise that as best we can. And I've been out to your factory, and I know the passion that you have in terms of manufacturing the product. But unfortunately, things do go wrong. And what we need to make sure is that when that does go wrong, the manufacturer is committed to fixing that as best they can on behalf of the consumer. In terms of your industry experts, everyone can be a textbook warrior. Everyone can be an expert based on their individual situation, but these guys aren't touching enough product to understand in terms of what's going on. They're not having constructive conversations with the regulators to understand in relation to the issues that go behind it and the instances that we see. And as an industry body, we see. I would have thought the majority of issues out in the marketplace, and can I say, relative to the obviously 800,000 consumers that are out there, it is a very small minority that have a major problem. It's disappointing that the industry that has so much potential, employs so many Australian jobs, and is now the largest Australian automotive manufacturer remaining in Australia. It's such a raw deal when it's unnecessary.
Absolutely, and lest we forget that. I mean, that is a very important part. Right now, with COVID-19, and I didn't want to get onto the subject of COVID-19 too heavily with you, but the fact is, though, with COVID-19, we are starting to maybe appreciate that manufacturing is an incredibly important part of our economy, of our society, as an employer of people, as a training, giving our youth something to look forward to. Where it's sort of been fluffed away a little bit, and we've allowed it to disappear out of our country. And right now, I think people are starting to review that and say, maybe it is more important that we do buy Australian-made products, not just because we're spending the money, but because of all the opportunities and the future that it provides us and our youth in the future.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt that Australian product is more expensive than maybe some product that comes in from internationally. But I'm proud to say that despite all this globalisation, some nearly 70% of all manufactured product comes out of an Australian-made manufacturer, and many of those manufacturers are small businesses such as yourself. Small mum and dad operators, employing locally, keeping in terms of the supply chain, buying locally. And absolutely contributing to the Australian economy. And we talked before about quality. I get to see a lot of product around the world, and I can put hand on heart and say that Australian manufactured product is the best in the world, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and again, that's something that people are forgetting when they put their hands in their pocket, thinking about the dollar, and they're not fully appreciating that by buying Australian products, generally speaking, you are buying a better product. Usually that's because there are, in fact, as you rightly put earlier in this, there is more regulations surrounding it. I mean, just every single component that we supply and we use in the caravan manufacturing has to go through compliancing issues itself. And then how we install it, how we apply that to the products has to go through some very steep and tough regulations, the qualifications of the people, et cetera, et cetera. Actually,
on top of that, Roy, it's also bearing in mind in terms of how the consumers are going to use the product. Australian conditions are some of the harshest in the world, and that isn't accounted for based on some of the conditions of these countries that imported product comes from. So it's no wonder that we see increasing numbers of issues with imported product relative to the toughness and sturdiness of Australian-made product, specifically designed for some of those great caravanning tracks that are around in the country.
Yeah, no, look, this is so true. In fact, I've got a relative in the United Kingdom that sells an extremely well-known brand over there, and he and I were talking, and I told him that particular brand was looking at coming into Australia. I won't mention the brand, but he actually laughed in terms of, I'm talking a belly laugh. He thought it was absolutely hilarious. He said, the average caravaner here in the UK, the average buys their caravan, takes it from here to a caravan park, parks it up, and then goes to that caravan for their holidays every year. And they might keep that caravan for 4 or 5 years, and then they might come in and trade it in and buy another one. And in fact, on average, they may only do 40 or 50 miles. And he said, in effect, the total number of kilometres done by a caravaner in the UK is less than the Australian caravaner does on his very first trip.
Absolutely.
They're not made to last. They're not designed to last. They're not supposed to last. They need the turnover of product, and that's why they're cheaper.
And most of the gravel that they would ever see is on the curb of the road bridge.
Yeah.
So when they come out and are subjected to some of the conditions that Australian caravan consumers love to put the product through, they in many cases just don't stand up.
Yeah. And this doesn't mean that they're all in the same boat, by the way. That there are some there's some very good products out there, but on average they're designed for large turnovers. In fact, I love the fact that in the UK you can find caravan graveyards where and events where they like to tow them behind cars and smash them up.
Yes.
Our caravans we don't do that, A, because most of them are too strong to be able to do that with, and also they hold a value because they're not designed to last 5 years, they're designed to last 20 years, because unless you design it to last 20 years, it's not going to last 5 minutes when you take it out onto our road conditions.
And I'm sure, Roy, you do about as much travelling as I do, and I take great delight at the end of the day going down the highway and seeing some of these very early caravans that maybe 40
that are still out
years
there.
old.
Yeah,
absolutely, still going strong.
And of course, they also make up a lot of granny flats and little bungalows out the back of places throughout the country for extending the house, so to speak.
Correct.
It occurred to me while I got you on the phone this morning, Stuart, that maybe I should take this opportunity to put it on you a little bit and ask, could we have a representative from your RV map come on the pod show and talk to us a little about what it is they do and when they're doing these audits, so that our listeners can find out what actually is being checked and discuss it with us. Would that be a possibility?
Absolutely, love to get James Field to come and have a chat with you.
Yeah, well, James, of course, has been with the association for a long time, and I know he's highly regarded in our industry for his knowledge base. So I wonder if you could.
Quite frankly, I don't know of anyone in the industry that knows more from a caravan perspective than James. He's been through it. He's got his hands dirty. But on top of that, and that's why we have the confidence for James to represent the industry on many government bodies, which are around standard setting and so forth. So, highly accomplished individual.
Yeah, well, when we come off air, I'll talk to you more about that. But,
absolutely.
I know I put you on the spot there a little bit.
Absolutely a pleasure.
Beautiful. Stuart, I think you've been fantastic taking up the time. I know you're a busy man. I know you've got a lot on your plate every single day, and you've taken this time this morning to come on and talk to our listeners, and we truly appreciate it. So you and I will catch up again in the not-too-distant future, no doubt. And,
that's good. Absolutely, Roy.
And by the way, you can buy me a coffee next time, because I think that's long since.
Happy to.
Good on you. Stuart, thanks again.
No problems.